I'm doing a segment or a series on Russian literature, and I want today to talk about one of the greatest works, and an early work of the Russian Golden Age. This is considered to be, by many, to be the greatest poem, and it's a long poem, so it's published as a book. You can get it as a Penguin Classic. It's written by Pushkin, and it's called Eugene Onegin. Now, in Russian, Evgeny Onegin, but I'll use the anglicized Eugene Onegin. And this shows the breathtaking capacity of Pushkin as a poet, because you see in this poem, in this long poem, in the story, the combination of the different influences that shaped Pushkin. Pushkin had received a kind of European education. He was fluent in French. He was familiar with London and England and had a knowledge of Shakespeare. At the same time, Pushkin was through a housekeeper who raised him, a serf. He had been exposed to the kind of folk tales of the old Russian tradition. This is, in fact, folk tales, some of which had their roots going back to pre-Christian Russia. And so Pushkin somehow managed to combine all this. And Pushkin also had African heritage, which is very interesting. The story behind it is sort of weird. The Tsar apparently heard that other European monarchs around Europe had Moors, which is to say black North Africans, at their court. And he goes, I want a Moor. I want a black guy in my court. And so he had a Moor, a young Moor, dispatched to the Russian court. He made him a military officer, and the man became a educated person of some rank. And Pushkin came from that line. So Pushkin actually had African blood and was very conscious of being part African. Now, this work called Eugene Onegin is a product of, you'd have to call it, late Romanticism. And although Pushkin denied it, there are echoes in this work of the English poet Lord Byron. Lord Byron was, in his early career, a sort of enraptured romantic. He was caught in the wind of the Romantic movement, and of course the Romantic movement was ecstatic about nature. It was ecstatic about being in tune with yourself. It was ecstatic about the idea of falling madly, uncontrollably in love. And all of this you see in Byron's early work, Childe Harold. But then you have the late Byron, which turned a skeptical, or one would have to say ironic, eye toward Romanticism. And this is the mood that Pushkin is going to pick up and capture. In other words, it's Romanticism, but Romanticism that turns upon itself and applies a certain measure of irony, almost as though there's a character or characters laughing at the romantic, going on and on about a daffodil, or going on and on about the ecstasies of love. We can see this late Romanticism in Byron. Byron wrote a work called Don Juan, but in Byron's day it was actually pronounced literally Don Juan. And in fact, the first lines are kind of funny. Byron goes, I need a hero, I need a new one, I think I'll call him Don Juan. And you can see, if you think about this, that what Byron is doing is he's kind of chuckling. He's mocking his own hero. I need a hero. I need a new one. My old heroes have disappointed me. And so, I think I'm just going to call this guy Don Juan. And Pushkin now adopts this late Byronic cynicism and puts it into his main character, a cosmopolitan cynic named Eugene Onegin. And you see elements of Byron, but also elements of Pushkin in this roguish, cosmopolitan character. Now, Eugene Onegin and his friend, who is a poet, are visiting a country estate of two sisters, and their names are Olga and Tatiana. And the poet, this is to say Onegin's friend, is very interested in Olga because Olga is beautiful and she's glamorous and she's sort of plucky and has a sort of confidence to her. The other sister, Tatiana, is reclusive, she's shy, she's withdrawn, she doesn't seem to say a lot. But Eugene Onegin, who is a very perceptive observer, notices right away that this sister Tatiana, the shy one, is actually a woman of great refinement, great sensitivity, great spirituality, great taste. But this is a sensibility that's not appreciated in the country, and also she is withdrawn. She is reserved, but she's only reserved because she is, you may say, concealing her virtue. And at one point, Onegin says to his poet friend, he goes, check out the other sister, Tatiana. I think you picked the wrong one. Onegin sort of knows, in a way that his romantic poet friend doesn't, that the real catch here is not the glamorous, over-the-top Olga, but the shy, reclusive Tatiana. Now, very interestingly, as the plot goes, Tatiana, maybe in part recognizing Onegin's appreciation of her, falls madly in love with Onegin. And she decides, and this is a remarkable thing for someone to do in Russia, in the aristocratic class in the 19th century, to write a letter to Onegin confessing her feelings for him and essentially saying, I'm in love with you. And this was not done. This was considered a very not just inappropriate, but a little bit of a dangerous thing to do because it could cause a bad man to take advantage of you. But nevertheless, having thought about it and reflected on it and obviously agonized over it, the shy girl, Tatiana, decides to go ahead. And she writes this beautiful letter. I say beautiful because Pushkin tells us the letter was written in French. Now, this is an odd thing to say because obviously Pushkin is writing in Russian. But the genius of Pushkin is that he can write in Russian, and when you read it, you can pick up the cadences of the French. You can see that what Pushkin has done is written the letter in French, translated himself into Russian, but the French sensibility is there in the letter. And here is Tatiana talking about all kinds of things in this letter, but revealing herself to be a person of great depth of feeling and of great ability to love. And she's putting it all on the page and putting herself on the line. And she gives this letter to her nurse and says, essentially, go give it to Onegin. And then she runs out into the wilderness and she's like, I just want to hide. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to come of me. And so the nurse goes and gives the letter to Onegin. And it takes a couple of days, and Tatiana is in this kind of suspenseful agony. She doesn't know what's going to come of it. And then on the estate, who shows up but Onegin and his friend, the poet. And Tatiana sees them, and she bolts. She takes off. She becomes, in Pushkin's words, like a deer fleeing from her predator. But Onegin spots her, and he goes running after her. And he kind of catches up with her, and he basically says, you wrote a letter. And she kind of denies it. No. And he's like, yes, you did. Don't deny it. You wrote a letter. And then he says something very remarkable. Onegin says, you have an incredible heart. You have an incredible ability to love. You would make an incredible wife for someone, but not me. And then he goes on to say, you don't know what kind of a person I am. Onegin says, I'm a man of the world. I've sort of been everywhere. I've been in places you don't really want to even know about. He goes, I have experienced the world. I've had relationships with many women. You know nothing about any of that. He goes, I'm not the person you think I am. In fact, I say one thing, but I do another. In short, there's a lot of not just complication, but there's a lot of evil in me. And so while you would make me a very good wife, I would make you a terrible husband. And then he goes on to say to her, he says, listen, the other thing I want to tell you is that this letter is a little bit reckless. This is not the kind of letter a young woman should write to a man. You have no idea what its consequences could be. So you have here, and this is Pushkin really in his kind of gentle, but I would say beautiful irony. Here's Onegin, who's kind of a scoundrel. This guy is a guy of low morals. This guy is a dubious character. He's been in gambling dens and so on. And what is he doing? He's lecturing a perfectly virtuous woman about virtue. Young lady, you better think twice about what you do. Don't write these kinds of letters. So he's basically become the kind of moralizing scold. And of course, Tatiana is completely devastated. She's horrified. She obviously regrets writing the letter, and she snatches it back, and she doesn't say another word. And then I'm going to leave the plot right there. And tomorrow I'm going to pick it up to where these two, who are separated at this point and don't encounter each other for many, many years, meet up toward the end of the novel in what is actually a very fascinating climax.